It's Friday the 19th of June 2020 and my chat today is with Andre J. Andre is going to give us some recollections of her growing up in Greenmount in the early days, even prior to World War II. Good morning, Andre. Can you tell me where you were born?
Morning, Don. In Busselton on the 1st of April 1928, and I mainly became a hills girl, Greenmount.
So you moved to the metropolitan area, obviously, with Mum and Dad?
Yes, as a young child.
Yeah.
Mm.
So what did Dad do for work?
Well, he was he survived Gallipoli and France during World War II, and he wasn't at all well. He'd been gassed badly in France and 3 times, and when he came back after the war, the Great Depression was on. There wasn't any work, and things were very, very bad. As a child, I can remember, seeing people taken out of houses and all their goods on side of the road. It was very, very bad.
Mm.
But my father died when I was 11, and things, were very, very hard.
Mm.
I went to school, Thomas Street in Subiaco, and then in 1941, the war having broken out in 1939, my mother and my sister thought it would be a good idea if we moved up the hills because of the threat of the Japanese and so forth. So we moved up to Greenmount, and that would have been in 1941. There
must have been quite a bit of fear in the community in those days.
It was, well, because I was only 11, but, all of a sudden people were joining up, going away, and people you knew, and then, of course, the casualties started. Rationing was brought in, clothing rationing, food rationing, sugar, and so forth, and sweets were in short supply. But we coped.
Yeah, and when the war came, you would remember or recall the bombing of Singapore and then Darwin?
Yes, but again, it wasn't... They only allowed so much news as they wanted. It was kept quiet about Darwin, the bombing.
Right.
But because of, I don't know, my mother's fear, she was in England during, it must have been the Boer War, because I remember her telling me about seeing Zeppelins coming over. And so it was decided we'd come up to the hills.
Yeah.
And, I was very grateful because I fell in love with the hills and I've loved them ever since.
The freedom.
I wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
And can you remember how you came up? Were there roads up here then?
Well, because we would have had furniture, so I presume a truck brought us up. I can't say I remember that. No.
And where did you live? Where did you move to?
To Greenmount.
What do you remember the address?
Swanview Road, at Lanarkrook.
Oh, okay.
It was called Lanarkrook. It was a property. It's still there. It's a Federation house, and it was owned by Canon Burton. My mother rented the house. We didn't own a property, and so my niece came with me. She was the same age, and also another little girlfriend from school. Her mother thought it was a good idea that she would come up, so the 3 of us were up here, and we joined the Girl Guides, and we loved it, the freedom of the hills.
And where were the Girl Guides? Where did you go to, like a hall?
It was, I can't remember, it was local. but I'm not certain where they used to.
Swan
do
View
it.
wouldn't have been very big in those days.
No, Swan View, there wasn't very much there at all. But there was a lot of activity in the hills because of Black Boy Camp. The camp was very active, and a lot of the boys at Blackwood that came from the eastern states.
Right.
They came by train over, then they did a certain amount of training at Blackboy, and then they went to the Middle East or wherever. And I know we'd be going to school. We'd walk from Swanview Road down to Greenmount Scott Street, and the Greenmount railway station was there. And so we'd catch the train from there to Mundaring. When we first came in the hill, when I first came in the hills, I was at Mundaring at Midland School, but they closed that because they were worried about the bombings to the workshops. So we were sent to Mundaring, and my class was in a church hall. So from Swanview to Scott Street, and then train to Mundaring, and then back again, every day. The education could have been a lot better because it was very dysfunctional.
Were there numerous classes, age groups?
Yes, all in different places. They weren't all together. It couldn't be.
So they had a few teachers there?
Yes, but my class was in this one little church hall, and that was it.
Right.
They were very good, but only being 12 and so forth, we thought it was a lot of fun.
Was that the school that's on the highway, just opposite the old post office?
In Midland.
In Mundaring.
It was where the village is now.
Right.
That was where their main school was there, but it wasn't big enough to take all, from Midland.
Yeah. So around the back of where you lived here on Swanview Road, as it is now, it's quite developed. But at the back of your home, what was there? What was, say, between Swanview Road and the old railway line that came up from Black Boy Hill?
Well, there was our orchard went, almost down to the railway line. Swanview Road was gravel, and there was only about 5 houses in Swanview Road. There was a very bad railway crash because of the tunnel, which the driver and I think fireman were gassed. The goods train was overloaded, and they went through the tunnel, and the gas knocked them out. But at the time, Swanview Station was in demand, and there was a station master there. He realised what was happening, and apparently switched the gauge so that the goods train came to another part of a line, because behind, coming up, was a troop train. So consequently, the accident we heard, and
you actually heard the noise.
You heard it. Oh, yes, it was
amazing,
terrible. And of course, we all raced down. Well, of course, there were animals. There was cows and so forth. And fortunately, the train coming up behind with the
troops,
a troop train, they had to kill the animals. But it was a terrible, terrible thing. And
was it during the day?
Yes, I can't remember the actual time, but we were home. Unless it was a weekend, I can't remember, what day. But I know we all raced down. I suppose mainly to see if we could help.
Yeah.
But it was terrible. But it could have been a lot worse if he hadn't switched the goods train. It would have backed into the troop train.
Would have gone straight down the hill.
Yes, and so yes, it it was one of those things that happened, not good.
Did you ever go up to the tunnel and walk through the tunnel when the
Oh
trains...
yes, that was a big dare thing to do
Would have
when
been.
you were young, you know, but
Yeah.
you had to be very careful.
You never got caught in there? They've got
No,
weren't that game?
No, we you know, but you know, kids, we did all those
Yeah.
type of things. With Black Boy Camp, with a lot of the boys, my mother and a lot of the ladies that lived in Greenmount, particularly ones that had sons and so forth in the forces, would have on a Sunday allow so many men to come from the camp for lunch.
Right.
So mother always did a roast. I mean, in those days, lamb was very cheap.
Yeah.
And so the camp would send up maybe 6 army boys, and they would come up and we would have soup, a roast, and some kind of dessert. And the women all round did the same thing.
Right.
So you know, a lot of these young boys, that was probably the last home cooked meal they had.
So there was quite a strong community spirit in
Oh yes,
Greenmount?
yes, we were all very much involved with the Red Cross. I know I used to knit balaclavas and scarves. I wasn't terribly good with the socks. The heel turning was always a problem. But we did a lot of, you know, Red Cross work. The liquor store now, which was the post office, which was the Wandu Golf Club, so to speak. The tea rooms there on Christmas Day, Mrs. Hunter, who used to run the post office, arranged that she would do, and all the ladies helped, and we did Christmas dinner for the boys. And you know, I remember after the first sitting, I think it was about 3 sittings she did, and I was clearing the plates and I found threepence underneath a plate. I thought, what's this? Never heard of tipping. And then we couldn't wait for it. But it was, you know, there's very much a good community spirit. Yes.
So Old York Road, as it is today, was the main road through when you first moved up here?
No, the highway was in, and actually the Old York Road wasn't used very much at all. Yes, the highway was in because there was certainly a lot of convoys, and there was a lot of kind of camps around, like on the Darlington River. There was camps there for certain types of army life, you know.
And you have quite a significant historical site close to where you live here.
Yes, I actually live on Chipp Sleep, and when they did the highway, they couldn't move it because Greenmount is very rocky, and virtually, you know, I'm living on solid rock. So I think most people know the history of Chipp Sleep, and actually in my front garden, the Aboriginal that was killed is buried there. Chipper came up on his way to York under horse and cart with a young boy, and he was attacked in Old York Road. He was speared in the leg, and the little boy was killed. He managed to get one shot off. I don't know, in those days maybe the guns only did one shot, but and he killed the Aboriginal. Anyway, Chipper managed to leap from the horse and cart and apparently jump off this big rock into the gully below.
To escape.
And he made his way to Guildford, and then the troopers or the police came up, and the little boy was buried actually just outside my window, and they buried the Aboriginal. The later on, the little boy was dug up and taken
Right.
to Guildford.
Right.
And when I first came back here in '89, I went out one day and there was a whole lot of Aboriginals on my verge. And, I went out and asked them, could I help? And then they explained that it was their ancestor that was there. And I said, well, I don't mind. I'm quite happy to have him there. It's a peaceful place, and I feel that he'll look after my house for me. And my neighbour then said that they used to come up every year, but they never came up again. And I'm quite happy. I'm sure he's happy there, and often I have a little talk to him as I go past. So, of course, National Park was there, and I believe there was a big camp in there. Right. But that's the history as I know.
Yeah. What roughly year was?
It would have been in the 1800s, because it would have only been a dirt track.
Yeah.
The goods used to come, by ship to Fremantle, and then by boat up to Guildford, and then by horse and cart to York and Northam.
Inland.
So that's
the other
quite
side
famous.
of the southern side of the highway as it is now. Was that just orchards in those days, or just bush?
Over there, no, the Greenmount National Park.
Right.
And there used to be elders' paddocks, which was over there, and they used to put sheep in there.
It was around Coongamaya way.
Yes, that big hill before there. There was often sheep there, and we used to roam all around there as children. And there was a waterfall from Greenmount National Park,
Right.
and there wasn't any houses there. The only one was an old house during the war by old Joe, we used to call him. He was an Italian, and he had I think he built it himself. It was a kind of a rock hut house, and he lived there with, he had a couple of cows and I think a couple of goats, and he always had milk arrowroot biscuits, I remember that. And Mother used to buy milk off him and cream. And so we used to go down and pick it up.
This is during the war?
This was during the war, yes. He wasn't interned. He was elderly,
No.
but I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he went back to Italy after the war or not.
So where did Mum do her shopping? Where did she get her supplies from?
Bones. Once every 2 weeks she would go to Bones.
Into Perth,
and buy the Beam Bus Company, and she would place her order and take ration coupons. Butter was rationed, and sugar, tea, and she'd place an order, and then Bones would deliver, and invariably there was a little packet of boiled sweets, in it. But tinned fruit and all those type of things were not possible.
Amazing. So where would she have caught from Swanview Road? How would she have accessed the bus?
She would walk down to past Old York Road to the highway. There was Stirling Road was a little road down, not far from the post office, and you'd catch the Beam Bus. The Beam Bus was a private company, and it went as far as Glen Forest.
Right.
The main depot was in Belmont, and it took approximately an hour by bus from Greenmount to Perth. And you would get off the bus in the terrace outside Government House, and you would catch the bus there. And often you'd be there, and I think his name was James Mitchell. He was the Premier then.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a little plumpish man.
Yeah.
And he would walk along the terrace and take off his hat, good morning ladies, or good afternoon ladies. He was quite a delightful gentleman.
Yeah.
So,
And was there a passenger train service up here?
no, only Greenmount. Well, Greenmount to Perth, but the bus was closer for us. It'd be too far from my mother,
Right.
say, to walk to Greenmount.
So, because I would have thought Swanview Station was far closer to your home.
No, yes, but that didn't go to... Oh, I see what you mean.
Was there a passenger train service going down?
Well, that was the main line to the eastern states.
Yeah. But was there a train line? Was there a passenger train service?
I don't
going into
remember
Midland?
that. I think it was mainly probably kind of Kalgoorlie, that situation.
Right, it was a
See,
main.
Greenmount railway station. There was Darlington, and then it went as far as Mundaring.
Right.
So people in Greenmount would, if they lived in Glen Forest or Darlington, they would use the rail,
Right.
whereas we used the bus.
Yeah, right.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm surprised that there was no passenger service.
Yes, I
Going down.
don't I don't remember that at all.
And it was Brown Park there then?
No,
You don't know Brown
no.
Park?
There was very few houses in Swanview Road. Not that we walked that way very often because there wasn't any vehicle cars. We had bikes and I had an old horse. But, we mainly, our activity, because it was walking all the time, was centred around Greenmount. Mm.
And as youngsters, what sort of social life did you have, like in those war years and after that? As you became teenagers and
Well,
were you just out in the bush?
Well, as I said, we had horses. Most of my friends had horses, and we'd maybe on a Saturday we'd take off and go to National Park in summer and have a swim there, and or else Rocky Pool, because you had the leeches to put up with, but at least you could get wet.
Yeah.
But it was the Girl Guides was, as I said, there was a lot of activity here. Red Cross was a lot of activity, and later I became involved with the RSL Women's Auxiliary, and the main part was Glen Forest.
Mm-hmm.
I was secretary for quite a few years, and Nancy McGlue was the president. There was a lot of activity in Glen Forest. They used to bring up men from the Claremont Asylum, men that were shell shock. They called it shell shock in those days.
From the First World War.
From First War, even the Boer War. I can remember an old gentleman there, and they would come up perhaps once every 6 weeks in buses, and the ladies of the community, we would put on a luncheon, again invariably the roast and that type of thing, and then high tea, cakes and so forth. And these men would maybe 2 buses. A lot of them would just walk around outside, but we would have entertainment. We'd put on a kind of concert or dance and so forth, and it did them good. And then there was other, like Swanview, Herne Hill, they did the same. And so when that happened, we would go and give a hand or that type of thing, and a lot of activity in Mundaring. So
was the highway going up where Mum would have caught the bus? Was that a bitumen road going?
Yes,
down
it was
to
bitumen there.
Was bitumen through to Glen Forest?
Yes, yeah. Well, they had to do it because of the transport, the army. There was trucks all the time going around.
Were there any accidents, many accidents that you remember on that hill? Because it was quite a steep hill.
Yes, I don't remember. The worst accident that I do recall was the American plane going into the hills, because the Americans were based at Guildford, and one plane took off, and I don't know what happened, but they went to the hill, and they were buried, and then after the war, all the bodies were taken back, and
that was in this area.
yeah, over there. It hit.
In the Greenmount Hill,
over there.
like the Darlington.
Over in the Darling Ranges.
Right. Amazing.
Yes, I can't remember how many were killed, but it was pretty bad. Yeah, not good.
So we've sort of travelled. You travelled all through this area that you lived.
Yes.
Basically by horse, you and your friends.
Yes.
And did the family have a car?
No, people didn't have cars.
Not too many of the residents around had
And
cars?
besides, there was petrol rationing.
Yeah.
A lot of the people that had orchards that were supplying food, they had kind of tanks on their cars.
Oh, yeah.
It was, I think it burnt coal or coke or something like that.
Amazing.
But no, you wanted to get somewhere, you walked.
So when the finally the war ended,
Yes.
what was the feeling when the war ended, and how did you hear about that?
Well, I remember at one stage when, not long after we were in Greenmount, there was an official came round from the government to interview my mother and find out, kind of who was living there. And we were issued with a kind of a half rubber ball and an identity disc with our names on it. And apparently Mother was given if there was going to be bombing and we were to be evacuated, because the only way to get to the eastern states would be the main line. So she was allocated numbers for cattle trucks for us to get into. And, thank goodness it never came to that. But I also understood that she was asked if the Japanese did come down, and, would she be prepared if we couldn't get away to give us a tablet.
Oh.
And so she didn't tell me about this till a long time after, but apparently she said yes, definitely, because she was, well, naturally, we were all young girls and
everybody was fearful.
Very, very, very worried about it. And but some of the boys started trickling back in the latter part of the war, and things were much better. But of course, once the war finished, it was one big relief.
Yeah, would have been.
I grew up in the era that most of the young men of my age and older then, were killed.
Yeah.
And a lot of, boys that I knew didn't come back.
Didn't come back.
No. Because I was 11 when the war started, but of course by the time it finished I was 16, 17.
Yeah.
So...
so you were still going to school then? What year did you finish?
No, I finished school, I think in 42, I'm not quite certain, but we had to get jobs, university wasn't then as it is now. So I went to work at the water supply as a clerk there, and I did night school, which was shorthand typing and accountancy. So that was 2 nights a week I had to go.
Where did you do that?
In Perth.
And you worked in Perth?
Yes, I worked at the water supply, which was up the top end where the barracks are, top end of the terrace. That used to be the water supply and public works. And so I would stay in and then go to night school at 6 o'clock and catch the 9:25 bus from the terrace home. So that was
up to Sterling.
Greenmount. So that was
And then
2 nights a
home.
week, walk home, and Mother would have some food waiting for me and so forth. But my girlfriend, she went into nursing, and another lass that lived opposite, she went into nursing. You had to work, kind of the situation. But I didn't fancy nursing, but I, was quite happy doing what I did. I remember I had to carry a pass to explain why I was in the city at 9 o'clock at night.
Oh, right.
Because there was always kind of troops in. And I remember particularly if a New Zealand ship was in, no other troops were allowed out, because the New Zealanders were apparently, they seemed to be, they were a wild lot, and there was a lot of fights between them. And of course the Americans were there, and there was a lot of hostility with the Americans, because the girls loved them. And there was at Crawley a base there, a big base for the
the Catalinas?
Catalinas, yes. But again, because there was a big Air Force at Guildford.
So this time you're speaking about now going to work was actually still during the wartime?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I was only, that would have been 42.
Right. So were there blackouts? Well, like coming from Perth to the hour trip by bus back up to where you got off the bus?
No, we didn't. I don't recall us having blackouts. It didn't get that bad. I honestly don't recall that. I think some of them. I'm not 100% on that.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
So in those years, like you were in your teens, and were there social dances held in the area?
Well, as I said, I was a member of the RSL Women's Auxiliary, and also that was affiliated with Anzac House. So I would be, perhaps over the weekends, a duty roster to go into Anzac House and do afternoon teas, afternoon teas, for the boys. And, so you kind of did all these things, and that was your life.
You never got to Midland for any activities, social life, cinemas?
No, the renowned theatre was at Midland, and I went to Renown, but I remember that mainly after the war.
Right.
I don't think it was operating during the war. I can't. Well, if it was, I was too young.
Yeah. My parents used to go to dances at the Scottish Hall.
Oh, right.
In Padbury Terrace.
No, I never went to any dances there, but at Glen Forest and Darlington and Mundaring. That was kind of later, when I was. Yeah,
so it sounds
16,
to me,
17.
I wasn't aware of it, the community spirit that existed in the hills, apart from out of the metropolitan area.
It was very strong, yes.
Yeah. Did you ever get up to Mundaring, or was there a bus route to Mundaring?
The train.
Oh, you got the train.
Yes.
But the train
from Greenmount to
from Green, you had to get over to
Yes,
Greenmount.
the bus only went as far as Glen Forest.
Oh, there you go.
So and if there was a kind of a dance on, if there'd be a group, if someone had a truck, we'd all go up on the truck. Because people didn't have cars, and I said rationing was very bad.
So you spent those early years here, and then you went to the Eastern States, you told me, and of course when you came back, how long were you away?
I was in the East roughly 30 years.
Oh, well, when you came back, things would have been very different.
Definitely. Perth was completely changed. All the shops that I remember had gone, and the arcades, and the eating places I remember, like the Wheat Sheaf used to be off St George's Terrace. That was a really nice, healthy shop with ice creams and fresh fruit and all that kind of thing. And it had changed. Well, everything changes.
And you moved back up to
Yes,
your
I
old haunts?
always decided when I retired I'd come back to Greenmount, which I did. I'm very, very grateful. I'm very happy.
Well, I think we'll finish it there. We've covered a lot of stuff.
Covered a lot of territory.
I've certainly learnt a bit about life during the war.
Yes.
And thanks very much for your time today, Andrea.